Alright, so now we're going to create this 3D boxes project, and we're going to be using some modern CSS to create this 3D effect where we have this angle here, and we connect the right and the bottom side, and it just gives us a 3D box look. And then we're going to be using a background image or a background GIF for each of these boxes, and it's all the same image. It's this minion image, and what we're going to do is extend the background size beyond the single box to make it as big as this container here. And then what we'll do is dynamically calculate the background position so we can move these around and basically form what looks like one big image when really this is just a bunch of the same image. We're also going to add an event listener onto this button here, so when we click this whole area shrinks, and it also gives us this rotate effect on each box, and then it combines them all together so there's no spacing in between, and it just looks like one big connected image. Alright, so we'll be using things like CSS transforms and transitions. We'll use the after and before pseudo selectors. We're going to be using a loop in JavaScript to go through these boxes and calculate the background position, and also add an event listener onto this with some CSS transitions to give it that rotation effect. Alright, so that's what we'll be doing. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so we're going to get started on the 3D boxes background project. So I have my project starter open, my 3 files here. Now the HTML for this is going to be really simple. It's actually only going to have 2 lines in the body. One will be the button and one will be the boxes container, and then the individual 16 boxes that are going to transform into one box when we click the button, those are going to be created from within the JavaScript. However, for now, until we get to that, I will just hard code them, and then we'll remove them later on and add our JavaScript. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here. Let's just change the title to, say, 3D boxes background. And let's get rid of this H1, and let's put our button. So we have a button, and I'm going to give it an ID of BTN and a class of magic. And inside here we'll say magic, and I'm just going to paste in an emoji here. You don't have to, but if you want that, you can just grab it from the repository. And then we're going to have our boxes container. This is going to have an ID of boxes because we do need to use it within the JavaScript. And for styling, we'll add a class of boxes. And inside here, like I said, this is ultimately going to come from the JavaScript, but for now we're just going to hard code them. So let's go ahead and say a class of box, and we want 16, so we're going to do *16, enter, and that will give us 16 divs with the class of box. Go ahead and save that, and all we're going to see is the button because obviously these are just empty divs, but we have to go ahead and style these. So let's jump into our style CSS. And we have our boilerplate, our Roboto font. We are going to use the Poppins font for the button, so what I'll do is just go ahead and duplicate this, and let's go right here, right before the ampersand, get rid of this, and let's put in Poppins, like that. And then down here in the body, we're just going to add a background color of a very light gray, so it's going to be FA 3 times. Can't really even see the difference, but just a light gray background. And then let's start on the styling for the button, which has a class of magic. So let's say magic, and we're going to give this a background color of a yellow. So we'll use hexadecimal here with the value of F9CA24. Okay, so that'll be the background. The color is going to be white. Let's add our font family here of Poppins sans serif. Save that. Good. We want to get rid of that ugly border, and let's give it some rounded corners. So border radius I'm going to do 3 pixels, and let's make the font size 16 pixels. We'll add some padding to make this bigger. We'll do 12 on the top and bottom, 20 on the left and right. Good. We want to have a cursor pointer so that when we hover over it, we have our pointer. Let's position this to the top. So I'm going to use position fixed, which will position it fixed in the browser window, and we'll say from the top 20 pixels. Okay, so that'll move it up. And then let's also add some letter spacing to space out the letters a little. We'll do 1 pixel for that. Good. And let's see, we're also going to add a little box shadow on the bottom. So for box shadow, we have our X offset, which I'm going to set to 0, and then the Y offset, I'm going to set that to 3 pixels because I just want it to be slightly on down here on the Y axis, right on the bottom. And then for the color, we'll use an RGBA yellow, so red, green, blue, alpha. So 249 for red, 202 for green, 36 for blue, and then for the alpha, which is the transparency, we'll do 0.5. So now you can see that there's a slight box shadow underneath. All right, now I want to get rid of this ugly outline on the focus state. So what we can do is take the magic class and say on the focus state we want to set the outline property to none. Get rid of that, and then I also want an effect that when we click and hold, when it's in its active state, that it moves down a little bit and gets rid of the box shadow, so it gives the effect of it's going over the box shadow. So how we can do that is with magic in the active state, we want to first remove the box shadow, so we'll set box shadow to none, and then we'll go ahead and set the transform property, and we're going to use translate Y because we want to move it along the Y axis just 2 pixels, which will move it down. If I did negative 2 pixels, it would move it up. So let's save that, and now you can see when I click and hold, it basically like covers that box shadow. All right, so I'm also going to add to this magic button a z-index of, we'll just put 100 because I want it to always be on top, even if the browser is really short and the image, the boxes go underneath. I want the button to be on top. All right, so that takes care of that. Now we're going to start on the boxes. So we have the boxes container, and then we have the individual box class, right? Now I want to be able to see what we're doing with the boxes, so for now I'm just going to add a background of yellow, and the height and the width here are very important, so that it's going to be 125 for both. Okay, so the width is going to be 125. Now the reason for that is because the boxes, the container, is going to have, let's do a height, is going to have a height and a width of 500, which is 125 times 4 is 500, and we want 4 across. Now to create the rows and columns with our CSS, we'll go ahead and use Flexbox on the container. So let's say display flex. Okay, as soon as I do that, they all get put in a row. However, they're not being knocked down to the next. I mean, there's only 4 that can fit here, so I want them to wrap. Basically, if it hits the edge, I want them to go on to the next line, create a new row, so we can say flex wrap and set that to wrap. Okay, now the reason it looks like one big block is because the numbers here are exact, right? 125 times 4 is 500, so there's no in between here. Now, ultimately what I want to do is click this button and have them separate, have each box separate. So what I'll do is I'll add a class onto this called big. Okay, and I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to say down here, if the boxes class also has a big class, then let's go ahead and extend the width and the height to 600 pixels. Okay, so from 500 to 600. And that's going to make the container bigger. Now, this obviously doesn't look right. We want this remaining space over here to be around each element, around each box. So what we can do is where we display flex here, we can set the justify content to be space around. Now if I save that, you can see now the remaining space is around each element. All right, we're also just going to add a position. Let's add position relative to boxes, and then down here for each box, let's go ahead and replace the yellow with an image, with that GIF. Okay, so we're going to say background image, and we want to set that to URL, and the link I'm just going to paste in. This is from giphy.com, and if you want to use a different GIF from this website or something else, you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now you can see that we just have this one image in every box as the background. All right, now ultimately we're going to want to change the positioning and the size of each of these. So let's actually add a background repeat, and we'll set that to no repeat. And then for the size, background size, we want to set this to the same size as the initial boxes, because we want it to take up that entire thing. Right now we have the class of big on, so it's at 600, but ultimately we want the size to be 500 pixels on X and Y. Okay, so now you can see that it's stretched out and you can only see part of the image, and it's the same part in each box, but later on we're going to change the positioning of each of these so that it looks like one big image. All right, so let's see, the next thing that we'll do here, we want to have a position of relative on this, because we're going to be using the before and after pseudo selector to give that cubed border look, and we need to position that absolute, so we want the container of that to be relative. Now another thing we want to do is when we do click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to toggle this big class. Okay, so it's going to go from that to that, and when that happens I want to have a rotate effect, so we want to add a rotation to the boxes if it has the big class. So let's go right here and let's say, so if boxes has the big class, we want each individual box to have a transform, and we're going to use rotate Z with a 360-degree angle. Okay, now we want this, when this happens, we want it to transition nicely, so let's add a transition onto boxes. So transition, just so it rotates smoothly, and we'll use 0.4 seconds with an ease effect, and then I'm just going to copy this and put the transition in the box as well. And now as soon as I save, you can see that it actually does that effect. Okay, because when that big class gets added, it will go ahead and do that, and we're going to make this button ultimately add and remove that class, which will make it twirl into place. Okay, so it'll twirl, or I should say rotate, and then go all together, and then it'll rotate and split apart. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Now the last thing that I want to do here is add that cubed effect. So not only do we want like a border on the right and the left, but we want it to skew so it goes like this at an angle. So to do this, to do the right side, we're going to use the after pseudo selector. So we can take the box class and then say :after, and you can use this to insert content. It needs this content value, and we could even put something in here, and now you can see that after that box element it puts hello, but we don't want that. We just want to leave this blank. The only reason we need this is to add some styling, so you can think of it as kind of like an invisible element. So this, for the styling, let's go ahead and add a background color, and we're going to use the background color of F6E 58D. It's going to be the background. We're not going to see anything just yet. We need to add the sizing and position and stuff like that. So we want to position this absolute. Okay, so we're positioning it absolute, and you need to have relative on the box because absolute should be, it's relative to the box, right? And then for the positioning, the coordinates, we'll do 8 pixels from the top. We want to, because we want to push it down a little bit because we're going to add that skew. And then over, let's do from the right, let's do -15 pixels because we want it to be, going this way. And then for the height, we want it to take up 100% of its container, which in this case is the box itself, and then the width is going to be 15 pixels. So if I save that, you can see we have this yellow part here. and it's pushed down a little bit because of this 8. In fact, if I put a 0 here, you can see it's flush. However, I want to use that, I want to have that skew effect here and here, so it'll be on both sides. And to do that, we can just use transform, and we want to skew on the y-axis because it's up and down, it's vertical, so skew y 45 degrees. And if I save that, now you can see we have that effect of it's coming off here and going, you know, at a skewed angle on both the top and bottom. Now we want to do the same thing here. We basically want it to come from here and go over, so it looks like it has that 3D effect. So I'm actually going to just copy this whole thing, and now we're going to use before. Okay, and for the background color, we're going to change it slightly. We're going to use the same yellow. Whoops. We're going to use the same yellow that we used. Where is it? Where's the yellow that I used for the button? Right here. So we'll just copy this background color here and set that here. Okay, just slightly different yellow. And for the positioning, we want it to be absolute, although we want to change. We're going to go, let's see, from the bottom, we want to go -15. And then from the left, we want to go 8 pixels. Okay, so it's basically the reverse of what we had before. And then the height, the width is going to be 100%, and then the height will be 15. So it's basically just the horizontal version of what we just did. And then we want to skew on the x-axis because it's horizontal. So I'll save that, and now you can see we basically have that same thing but going this way. So what we want to do in the next video is, of course, we want to add the functionality where we click this button and it does its little rotate and goes into what looks like one big image, and we want to be able to toggle that. But we also need to change the background position. We need to make that dynamic within these boxes, because right now they're just all in the same position, which obviously doesn't look right. We want it to look like it's one big image. All right, so that's what we're going to get into next. Okay guys, so now we want to start on the JavaScript, which isn't a lot actually. It's only about 20 lines or so, a little less. But I first want to just explain what we need to do with the background position. So ultimately, as I said before, all of these boxes are going to be inserted to the DOM via JavaScript. We're not going to have these hard-coded. And we're also going to add a background position to each one. Now I'm going to do that manually just so you can see what the values are going to be. So for this first one, we'll just go ahead and set a style here and set the background position. So background position has an X and Y property. For this first box, it's going to be 0, 0. Okay, which is the default, so I mean it's not even going to change, but that's going to be the first one. The next one, let me just copy this right here, this whole style, and put that in. So this one here, let's think about where this needs to be. So remember, these are 125 pixels width and height. So for this one, we want part of the 125 pixels to be shifted this way. All right, so with this background position, this first value is the X value. So we want to go -125 pixels. And if I save that now, you can see that it basically looks like it's connected. In fact, if we get rid of this big class and we save, it is connected. So for the next one, and if you guys want to take a second and think about what you should put here, go ahead and do that. So we did, for the X value for the second box, we said -125. Now for this one here, we want to actually double that, right? So instead of -125, because if I do that, it's going to just match this one. We want to go over 125 more, so we want to change this to 250. Okay, and now it looks like it's part of the image, like it's one big image. For this one here, the fourth one, let's go ahead and do -375. And there we go. So now we have our top row. Now for this one here, it's going to be a bit different because now we're dealing with both X and Y values. So for this one, we're going to have And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just showing you what what we need to do within the JavaScript. But this is going to be 0 on the x-axis because it's the first one, and it's going to be on the y-axis. We want to do -125 because we want to bring it up. Okay. Now the second one we need to bring over and up, or I should say that it's actually the sixth one. We need to bring over and up. So what we would do is on the x-axis 125, and then on the y -125. There we go. Okay, and then we would just continue that, bringing these up and over. So what I'll do is just completely get rid of all the boxes. Okay, we just want to have the container here. We just want to have this ID boxes, class boxes, and then that's going to completely go away. Now we're going to jump into our script and do this with JavaScript. So first thing we need to do is bring in any elements that we need, such as the boxes container. So we'll use the document object, and we're going to use the method getElementById, and we're going to get the ID by the box's ID. And then we also want the button because we need to add an event listener to that. So let's say const btn, and we'll use document getElementById. I believe it has an ID of btn. Okay, so we bring those in. Now the way that I'm going to do this is we're going to have a function called createBoxes, and we want to call that function. And then inside createBoxes, we need to create 4 boxes for each row, so 4 columns of, or 4 rows, 4 columns. So the way we can do that is we can use 2 for loops. Okay, so let's say 4, and I'm not going to explain what a for loop is. It is expected that you know at least the fundamentals before taking this course. So let's say let I, so we want to set I to 0, and then the condition here is going to be if I is less than 4, and then we want to increment I by 1. Okay, now we have rows and columns here, so we want to put another for loop, and we have to use something different than I. So let's do let j equals 0, and then as long as j is less than 4, and then j plus plus, increment it by 1. Now within here we want to construct those 16 boxes. Okay, so this is going to loop through 16 times, and we're going to create this with document, and then there's a method called createElement, and we want to create a div. Remember, so we're just creating these divs here. That's all we're doing right now. And we can even go ahead and console log box, and if we go over here and open our console, you see that we now have, should be 16 divs. Now remember, they need to have the class of box, so what we can do is take our box variable, our box element, take the class list and call the add method, and we want to add the class of box. So if we save that, now we can see that over here in the console. Now this is where we're going to do the positioning. So to add a specific CSS style, we can use .style and then whatever property we want, and it has to be in camel case, obviously. So we want background position, and we can't do background dash position, which is what we would do in CSS. We do it like this with camel case. So background position, and the way we can set this to be dynamic is we can put some template literals here so that we can use variables and expressions, and remember, it's going to be something like, you know, -125 pixels 0. It's going to be something like this, but of course this is going to be dynamic. So what we can do is we can put a variable syntax, so $ and curly braces. We can put a variable or an expression in here, and we're going to take -j, because remember it's going to be -125, -250, etc. So we want to take that and multiply it by 125. So it'll loop through. It'll be, you know, 0, then -125, -250, -375. So that's the x value. Now for the y, we're going to go ahead and put another variable expression in here and use -i, and also multiply by 125. So this will do exactly what I did manually a few minutes ago, but it will add it, through the JavaScript dynamically with these calculations. Now, the last thing we want to do is not console log. Let's get rid of that. We want to take our boxes container that we brought in earlier, and we want to call append child, and we want to add in the box. So if I go ahead and save, let's see, something's not right here. Let's see, so we set the box.style background position to, oh, I forgot pixels. So right now it's just setting it to the numbers. We need to actually add in px after these pixels, and there we go. So right now we have the class, I'm sorry, we don't have the class of big, so it's 500 pixels, which squishes them all together, and there's no in between. But if I add the class of big, it separates them, but it's still intact. Now we just want to add an event listener onto, let's actually get rid of, no, we'll keep the class there to start with, but let's go back to our script and let's go up here. Actually, we'll go, yeah, we'll do it right here. So we'll take our button, and we want to add an event listener. So we want to listen for a specific event. Now this takes in the event we want, which is a click, and then a function. So we can either put, function, or we can use an arrow function like this. Okay, and we just want to, we don't even need, since this is only going to be one line of code, we don't even need these curly braces. So we'll just take the boxes container and take class list and then toggle, so it'll add and remove the class of big. So let's save that. Let's go over here. Let's click, and there we go. So we get that cool effect. And just to show you, let me just make this bigger because we're just about done. If I show you in the console, let's put this over here, and if we look at this class, right, so you can see that the class of big is there. If I click that, it adds and removes it, and that's what causes that effect. And we have that rotate in the CSS, right? So right here we have this rotate, which is causing that to happen. We also have a transition of 0.4 seconds. You can increase that if you want, or decrease that if you want a different speed. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this little project, and let's move on to the next one.